Everyone take a nice deep breath, please. All right. So I'm feeling guided to speak about multi-trajectory metamorphosis and a little bit about what that entails and going through your human metamorphosis experience in a very evolutionary way. And so when you are a multi-hyphenate or multi-trajectory light, so to speak, your life takes on a very different nature, a very different structure. And in order to come into that greater expansion and understanding, you have to go through a metamorphosis. And again, in an evolutionary way. So let me provide a little context to this to make some distinctions in terms of what is the difference between a traditional metamorphosis that often involves transformation versus an evolution. Now, let me just say, within the evolutionary context, transformation is happening, but it's in a very different way. We hear the metaphor or the analogy in terms of a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly, it transforms into a butterfly. But in the human experience, because we are constantly evolving, it is very evolutionary in terms of something becoming something different and not just, okay, it transformed into something. Because once this happens, it can't go back. It becomes a new creation. So taking on that new nature in terms of when you are a multi-trajectory, like you're a multi-hyphenate individual, and your life is calling you to multiple missions, and you live a different type of experience. And I've talked about this in other renderings, where the breakdown of what you have known so that it can become a new creation type of life is what you will be undergoing. And so this is not just a transformed life in terms of something that is new and improved and additions added to your life. No, it is a complete breakdown and decomposing of what you've once lived in order to actually have a new creation type of experience. This is part of the new human experience, right? So when you have a multi-mission calling and purpose, again, how you show up in life, how you show up in your purpose will be different. And so the decomposing is of those older structures and systems that we once lived by. All right. I've been doing this for several years, so I know what it's like to go through the consistent changes of the decomposing so that new creation formats can come into play. And so those of you who are new to this path in terms of how you do this with your life's purpose and living, you have to look at the life that you've been living. There's information within these experiences, they're codes. And when those codes unlock, it has the new information in terms of what your new identity, your new life will look like. So when you think about a caterpillar, every caterpillar is encoded to become a butterfly, but every caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly for various reasons. Sometimes they expire in their caterpillar life, or they get in the chrysalis process, the cocoon, and they don't survive the process to become something new because in the decomposing, there wasn't the syncing up with the newer format so that it could be recoded to become something different. So a lot of you have been stuck and feel like you're in a holding pattern in terms of what you're here to do. And even when you feel called and passionate to do different things, you don't yet know how do you bring that into what will seem like some type of cohesive experience. But the stuckness also comes that that's part of the breaking down from the old paradigm that makes you think that your life purpose, that it has to be this one thing and somehow you're making everything work together, where sometimes things are in separate categories, but they are cohesively working together. even your life's purpose, in your mission. But the stuckness comes when we don't surrender the frameworks that we are accustomed to putting things in. And I know this all too well as I was going through my metamorphosis in this way. And I'm pretty open and flexible to new things taking place. But because of the life that we've lived in the society that we've been in, and cultural, different cultural norms, I should say, that we still look to put things in a specific framework. And sometimes you're going to have to be frameless in terms of what is syncing up. All right. So in your metamorphosis, as things are decomposing, it's fragmented. If you were to prematurely cut open a cocoon, a chrysalis, it's a bunch of gunk. It's messy. It's not, it's unformed matter. What it once was is not, and it's not what it is going to be. So there's this middle process, and sometimes that's what your life feels like. And it feels like you're stuck because there is no true formation to what you're living at this point, because something else is emerging. So as this newer context of you being a multi-trajectory light, unlocking that encoding is the new information about your paths of purpose and your livelihood. That's what's being revealed to you. But you have to sync up with this so that the newer information can start to be revealed to you about the steps that you need to take, and you not get distorted, or disillusioned, or distracted by what hasn't come into fruition yet. All right. And the reason why a lot of times things won't come into fruition is because you're looking for it to shape up in an identity, in a framework that you're familiar with. And when something's becoming a new creation for your life, it simply cannot hold attachments to the former, even if the former was something good and great. When your encoding unlocks, you can't be something that you're not designed to be. So again, caterpillars that have the encoding of becoming a butterfly, that's their greater potential. That's their greater divine living expression. And so they have to relinquish the old format to come into the new. And they have to be willing and courageous enough, brave enough to go through that total decomposing, that, that having yourself just fragmented in a sense, things not making sense, letting go of all the predisposed, patterns and dysfunctions and different things. And when I say even in dysfunctions, meaning it's, even if your life was good, it's going to be dysfunctional to the life you're meant to live in terms of disruptions of the breakdown. So when we've been in a world that tells us, okay, you are supposed to know what you want to do for the rest of your life, in a sense, and you go to school for this, or you get a job here, you do these things, and this is going to sort of constitute your life's purpose. You don't need to do too many things. You need to focus on one specific thing and then do that first. And then if you want to start doing other things, you can. Well, the way humanity has been emerging, that paradigm has been flipped on its behind, because actually it's been to the biggest detriment to stifle the expansive purpose that people live to here to live, because we've been conditioned that no, you got to do it this way, and you don't need to be all over the place. And that's not actually what the role of, or the desire for expanding in that level and expressing that level of creativity is about. But we haven't had the frameworks, if you will, to support this type of livelihood. So even though you're someone who knows you're here to do multiple things, but because you have been under the structures that don't really support that, again, that's part of your breakdown. And then you understanding you have to come into a newer way of living and being. So going through the unformatting and being unformed so that your new data, your new encoding about your multi-level purpose and mission and livelihood can reveal itself to you, that's where you have to be surrendered to the process, and you have to allow that new information to come forth. Now, what blocks up receiving the new information or your codes unlocking is when you are still trying to think in terms of the old norms that will simply not work for you, right? So going through again this multi-trajectory metamorphosis is in the experience. What's going to happen is the different paths will reveal themselves to you. The different trajectories of how you're supposed to be living and being and serving will reveal itself. And sometimes not all at once. It will be that you start off, yes, on one or two initial endeavors, and then that opens up and expands. And I've done talks, around this. I make sure that I link in the description too. You can go back and listen to me actually sort of break down and give some analogies in terms of my own journey, even with my educational path and certain living paths of relocation, how that became expansive and how everything had a connection for my grander purpose. And it did come into a cohesive type of experience. But again, in the metamorphosis and the breakdown of how we are to be, this is where you're going to learn who you actually truly are and why what you've lived up until this point will seem like a false identity, even though it was the nature of who you were at one point. And so when you think about, yes, a caterpillar, that was the identity that it's known for, that being in that type of format. But within that caterpillar, as I mentioned, there's an encoding. And that encoding is the encoding of a butterfly. Again, its grander potential. So it has no clue that that is there. But as it's inching along in life, then something ignites that, it activates that code, and now puts them in the trajectory. They're at a juncture where a cocoon experience has to happen, which they're going to go through alone, in a sense. And most of you have felt very lonely in terms of your experience because you're misunderstood. People don't really understand that. And then people maybe who do, they don't know how to actually help and support you with this type of initiative. And then even those out there who are, what do they call them, multi-passionalites or something like that. Even that's a very limited experience too, even though it is opening up more for people to feel comfortable with being multi-creatives and doing different things. But that framework too is very limited to how it plays out in terms of when someone is a multi-trajectory light and they are multi-hyphenate, it takes on a different nature. So you literally have to have a metamorphosis, because it's not just about, oh, I love to do this and I do this and I find ways to do all of that. No, a multi-trajectory experience is paths within paths. It's integration of what would seem like multiple timelines of one's existence playing out in a very cohesive way. But again, different strands are being worked on at different times, especially when you're in the metamorphosis. So that really just disrupts and, really dismantles and brings full demolition to the known structures, right? And then within your unique code, it's going to be something that's customized to you. So there won't be a cookie cutter template in terms of a one size fits all. You have to do it this way and this way in order for it to work. You will receive what your unique information is and then be able to start customizing your experience from there. But again, letting everything break down so that the new information about you and who you're going to be will come forth. So again, going back to the encoding that's in the caterpillar, once that starts unlocking, that breakdown of that old format is what takes place. and then the syncing up with the new information, the new data, the new codes, bring that being into a completely different entity of expression. And so your life will indeed reflect something that is totally different than it was before. And I'm not just, again, talking about some new and improved or some upgraded, life, so to speak. It will be as if you are living in a completely different universe than the norm, than the rest of people who haven't been in this type of process or don't even know anything about that or not even feel that they're called to this experience. But for you, your life will be completely different, will be completely different. And the reason why I bring up in terms of you don't want something that's new and improved, because we hear the terminology or the phrasing about the next, the best version of yourself. But see, the best version of yourself in a certain framework pales in comparison to what is actually in you that wants to come forth. So you don't want a better version of what was. You want a complete evolutionary experience that will allow you to live a fuller life and a more expansive calling, being able to, yes, facilitate multiple types of experiences, a multi-mission type of purpose, and also the different ways that you can live out. But in order for you to embody the mindset and the beingness of this type of way of being, is that you literally cannot be you can't be new and improved. You have to be different. Your orientation will be different. The life that you will live will be different. A butterfly, once it launches from the cocoon, it is going on to live a completely different life in a different format. So though it may seem like it's launching into the same world, the way that it will live and participate in life is going to be totally different. And it doesn't even have recall of being a caterpillar. So you're not here to be a bigger caterpillar. You're here to be this multi-dimensional butterfly, this multi-trajectory butterfly, to be expansive in that way, multifunctional, multi-directional, a very multiplied way of being, right? And different, like I said, different paths that are integrated. And so you have to allow this experience to ensue. You have to allow yourself to evolve, to become a new creation, to become something completely different, in your life to look different. Yes, you're still going to be in your human body and physicality, so to speak. But again, even your appearance and different things may take on a different nature too. More than likely it will, but obviously you're still going to be the same of, who you are. But the way that you operate and the way that you live and the way that you facilitate your life's purpose in different missions, that is going to look completely different. It's going to be re-engineered and recoded to fit who you have become and what is the emerging self that is going to be a continuum. So when you start leveling up in terms of your the next best version of yourself, that has to be something that is taking place beyond the cocoon process, because that's going to ensure that it's not a new and improved. If you're going to have a new and improved version of yourself, it has to be something that is after the metamorphosis and not before. Not before. The breakdown within the decomposing, again, it's going to shed away what is no longer relevant to you, introduce the new information, and then that's where you start to define and redefine and be refined in terms of why you're here. And then you see things that you felt that you were prepared for or were preparing for take on a different nature, you start to understand your entire life that you've lived up into this point from a very different vantage point. It will help you to understand more why you actually lived what you lived and why that had to be, and then why there had to be the disruption, even if, again, it was a great way of doing. Because you're shifting from your human doingness to your human beingness and your multi-purpose, your purpose of doing versus a beingness. And that's, a whole nother teaching and training. But I felt compelled and guided to talk about the multi-trajectory metamorphosis and how, yes, when that decomposing takes place, multiple paths and multiple missions will be revealed, and the breakdown of what no longer will serve what's emerging, again, that's going to shed away. But you will hold yourself longer in a holding pattern when you don't surrender, and then you could potentially choke out the what's trying to emerge. So you don't want to expire and forfeit your multi-trajectory destiny in that gap. Because one thing I can tell you, I can assure you of this, you can't go back to being something that you once were. See, this is the difference again between the evolutionary aspect. People think, okay, with transformation, but transformation is more in a linear process, like how a tadpole transforms into a frog. It just becomes an adult version. When you go through a metamorphosis, you can't go back to something that once was. Okay. So you have to push through this journey, or you just don't really have a purpose. And that in between, because it's so fragmented, you'll never be able to really make heads or tails of life. And life will always be fragmented. It will never have any type of cohesive wholeness to it because it's going to be in that unformed state. And you have to come into a form, or if not, potentially spiritual death or different things take place. But again, when you're here to be this multi-trajectory expression and you come through that metamorphosis, yes, then you're going to live out a very multi-dimensional experience, which is why you're here to do multiple things. Now, how that plays out is different. And of course, I have different platforms and academies and resources that help you to navigate these experiences. So be sure to check within the description where I will have a plethora of different levels for you to participate in, and also for the academy, so to speak, if you would like to be a part of that experience. And then I offer assistance with coaching and consulting and counseling as it relates to this experience, because it is an experience, and in different phases there are different levels to it that you have to learn how to navigate. And at critical points you actually have to be doing certain things to code up in time for your metamorphosis to ensue. I have to say this, that these types of processes, and I stress this highly to those who are empathic, because they tend to want to control their evolution and be on their own time. Once this journey ensues, you're not on a self-paced type of experience. There are different things that will be occurring, just like when a woman is pregnant. Different stages of the trimester, the baby is going to come at a certain point. So you can't self-pace a pregnancy, and nor can you self-pace, in a sense, a metamorphosis that is ready to kick in to bring you into your greater expansion. Life will simply not allow you to remain in a certain format, and it will be extremely uncomfortable and unbearable. It's what I call the beautiful, brutal experience. But when you don't have resistance around the new coming into fruition in and through you, that's going to make the journey a lot more simplified and more exciting and beautiful, and actually bring you to the places that you need to be quicker. So I have, again, different trainings around this and take people through the processes because when you go through that metamorphosis, there's multiple metamorphoses within the metamorphosis. And I'll say this before closing out because I've seen it on so many different levels where at different times I had come into what felt like a form. And then next thing you know, there was the decomposing all over again. And like, what is this? And it's because different trajectories had their own metamorphosis going. And also, too, the higher part of the divine nature was not going to allow me to level out too soon of thinking, oh, this is my new form. This is my final form. Um, when that was not what it was, that's not what was going on. But also understanding when I came into different forms, that there were also going to be times where, because it's a morphing experience, that I had to let different aspects decompose. And they're not all going to be, disruptive in a sense, but you'll know when something is not going to work anymore. And the decomposing sometimes will start to happen on a uncomfortable scale when you don't go with the flow to make those shifts in time. So I just want to share that. And that's why this level of work, you need someone to help you be able to navigate throughout this experience. So I hope that this has been enlightening and empowering and evolutionary at the same time, and gives you more context to your multi-trajectory awareness that leads you to your new levels of beingness. So I look forward to being back with you soon. Take care and stay blessed.